She was halfway through unbuttoning her blouse when the door swung open. Her fingers froze. So did his breath. The hallway light spilled in behind him, catching the curve of her shoulder as the fabric slipped slightly off her skin. She turned her head, startled, lips parting in a silent gasp. Her chest rose sharply, her bare feet shifting against the marble tiles of the guest suite. She was supposed to be alone. He was not supposed to be there. But he was. Damien Rousseau, the elusive billionaire heir of the Rousseau Group. Known for his silence in boardrooms and the sharpness of his gaze, not for walking unannounced into his own guest suite. Their eyes locked. His were a stormy shade of blue, deeper than she remembered from the newspaper articles. Hers, wide and startled, held more emotion than he was prepared to absorb. "I did not know," she whispered, her French accent clinging to every syllable, soft as lace, broken with embarrassment. Something shifted in his expression. His hand, still gripping the door handle, loosened. He did not look away. And then, as if drawn from somewhere ancient and uncontrollable, she murmured, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur." The words were barely audible, but to Damien they might as well have been thunder. His throat tightened. That whisper, wrapped in apology and something else vulnerability, maybe undid him in a way nothing else ever had. Not the mergers, not the wealth, not the women who always said too much or too little. Just this moment. A maid, in a silk blouse slipping off one shoulder, flushed from surprise, speaking French like it was a prayer. She reached for her shirt, fumbling, clumsy, mortified. "I was just changing the linens," she said quickly, trying to recover. Her voice wavered between service and shame. He finally looked away. "Of course," he said, but his voice was strained, rough at the edges. He stepped back into the hallway, closed the door gently, and stood there, still, heart pounding. For a man who had built walls around his life so high no one dared to climb them, that moment was a crack. It was not about seeing her undress. It was about how she looked back, how she did not scream, how she did not giggle, how she said his name with reverence he had not earned. He had no idea then that this would be the beginning. That the maid he was never supposed to meet would be the one to quietly invade his world. That her presence would unearth a loneliness he had buried so deep he had forgotten it had a name. That love could enter not through the front door, but in a moment of accident, when silk met skin and someone spoke French in a whisper, meant for no one. And as for her, she never imagined that undressing in a borrowed room could change her life. But it did. Because he came back. And the second time he knocked, it was not for an apology. It was for her. She had taken the job out of desperation. Juliette Moreau was not the kind of girl who dreamed of working in mansions. She'd not grown up fantasizing about chandeliers or ironing designer sheets. But when her mother fell ill back in Marseille and her student visa was nearing expiration, Juliette had done what many girls without choices do. She compromised. She accepted a temporary placement through a high-end domestic staffing agency in Manhattan. 1 year, live-in position, discretion required, no personal attachments, just clean, organize, and disappear. The contract was strict. The pay was generous. The rules were cold, but they had promised privacy, and to Juliette, privacy meant dignity. What she hadn't known was that the estate she'd be working in belonged to the Rousseau family, and that Damien Rousseau, the billionaire son who rarely even visited the States, would be returning for an extended stay following his father's health scare. Damien Rousseau had not intended to return to New York. He had spent the last 3 years in Zurich building his own empire, clean tech investments, logistics restructuring, and quietly acquiring controlling shares in failing competitors. But when the call came that his father had collapsed during a board meeting, he flew back without hesitation. He didn't come back for the legacy. He came back out of guilt. Guilt he would never speak of. Guilt that kept him up most nights in the penthouse library, staring at old photos and wondering when his heart had turned into stone. The house was sterile, too quiet. His mother had died a decade earlier. His father was in a private medical facility. The staff barely spoke unless spoken to. The walls echoed with polished silence. And then there was her. He noticed her before the incident. Of course he did. She moved through the house like she was always apologizing for existing. She wore simple clothes, tied her hair in low buns, avoided eye contact. But once he had seen her alone in the garden humming softly as she picked up fallen petals near the stone path. It wasn't the song that caught his attention. It was the way she smiled when she thought no one was watching, small, sad, and utterly human. He had not planned to speak to her. She was staff, and Damien Rousseau had boundaries, strict ones. But the day he walked into the guest suite unannounced, everything changed. Juliet had been assigned to the suite that morning. The linens needed changing. The windows needed polishing. It was unoccupied, she was told. No one ever used that wing. She had set her cleaning supplies down, taken off the outer sweater she wore over her blouse, and unbuttoned her top to adjust. The camisole underneath it clung uncomfortably after her walk in the summer heat. She did not expect the door to open. She did not expect him to see her, and she certainly did not expect her reaction to be a whisper in French. But that was what came out. Reflex, language of her childhood, language of fear and softness. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur. Damien hadn't moved for several seconds. It wasn't because he was trying to look. It was because he had forgotten how to look away. Her voice, the lilt of her accent, the vulnerability of the moment, it short-circuited something inside him. And when he closed the door, he didn't feel embarrassment. He felt something far more dangerous. Intrigue. The next morning, Juliet considered requesting a transfer. She had embarrassed herself. She feared she had crossed some invisible line, but no message came from the estate manager. No reprimand, no dismissal, nothing. Instead, she received a simple instruction. Prepare the East Wing library for Mr. Rousseau by noon. Fresh flowers, dusting, light refreshments. She obeyed, of course. She always did. And when he arrived that afternoon, he didn't mention what happened. He didn't acknowledge the moment in the suite. He only said, "I like jasmine tea. Strong, no sugar," before walking past her and sitting by the window with a book. That was how it began. Quietly, without acknowledgement, without permission. A strange new rhythm between them formed in the silence. She became assigned to his spaces more frequently. The library, the private garden, the guest suite again. He never requested it directly. She never questioned the change, but they both knew. He started asking questions, casual at first. Do you read poetry? Do you speak only French and English? What is Marseille like in the winter? She answered carefully, formally, but each day she gave a little more, a longer sentence, a smile that lasted 1 second too long. He never touched her, never crossed a line, but his eyes held questions she could not name, and hers held answers she wasn't ready to say aloud. They were not equals, not in the eyes of the world. She was a maid, he was a billionaire, but behind the glass walls of that estate, in the quiet hours when no one else roamed the hallways, they became something else. Two people with too many walls. Two strangers drawn toward something neither of them understood. And it all began with an accident. A door that opened too soon. A blouse that slipped too low. A whisper in French. And a man who forgot to breathe. Juliet didn't expect the silence between them to be so loud. After the moment in the bedroom, after the whispered French words that slipped past her lips before her brain could filter them, she thought that things might shift back to normal. Or at least to the version of normal where he never looked at her for more than 2 seconds. But that wasn't what happened. Now, every time they crossed paths, his gaze lingered a little longer. His footsteps slowed when she passed, And in moments when the house was quiet, when the rest of the staff had gone home, and only the night crept across the marble floors, she would catch him standing in a hallway he had no business being in, close to her. And he would say nothing, neither would she. At first she thought maybe he was angry, that she had embarrassed him, that her presence reminded him of something uncomfortable. But then came the moment in the kitchen. She was stacking dishes late at night, humming a song from Home, an Edith Piaf ballad that always reminded her of her grandmother. The room was dim, lit only by a single hanging bulb. She didn't hear him come in, but when she turned to reach for the drying cloth, he was there, watching. He didn't speak, didn't move, only leaned against the frame of the door like he was trying to memorize something fragile. She froze. "I didn't know anyone was awake," she whispered. He stepped forward. "I couldn't sleep." His voice was low, almost hoarse, like it had been dragged over gravel. Their eyes met. She should have looked away, should have made an excuse to leave. But she couldn't. The moment stretched, heavy with something unspoken. "You have a beautiful voice," he added. She swallowed hard. "It's just an old song." He nodded slowly. "Still, you made it sound like it meant something." And maybe that was when she knew he wasn't angry. He was affected. Something in her had touched something in him, and neither of them knew what to do with it. From that moment on, the air between them changed. It became denser, charged, like a storm hovering just beneath the ceiling. He would find reasons to pass her in the hall. She would find reasons to linger in the room just a few seconds longer. Small things, subtle things. Until the night it all unraveled. She was in the library, replacing a book she had secretly read during her break. She didn't think anyone knew she touched the shelves, let alone took books to her small room and devoured them under the covers, with a flashlight like a teenager. But as she reached to slide the novel back into place, a voice behind her said, "I wondered who was reading my first editions." She turned, startled. Damien stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, no tie, 2 buttons undone. Casual, but not careless. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I always put them back exactly." "I'm not upset," he interrupted gently. "I just didn't expect you to choose Proust." She flushed. "It was the only French one." He stepped into the room. "You speak it like a secret." She blinked. "What? French? You speak it like you're confessing something you don't want anyone to hear." Her breath hitched. "Maybe because I've learned it's safer that way." He said nothing at first. Then he moved closer, slow, deliberate, like approaching a frightened animal. "You said something the first time we met in French." "What did it mean?" She looked down, heart racing. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." She looked up, met his eyes. "It meant I wasn't ready to be seen." That stopped him. The room felt smaller, tighter. "And now?" he asked softly. "Now I'm not sure if I want to disappear or stay exactly where I am." The confession cracked something open. His expression shifted, less guarded, more raw. "Juliet," he said, and the sound of her name in his voice made her knees weaken. "Do you know what you did to me?" She didn't respond. Couldn't. He took another step. "You were never supposed to be here. This house, my life, it's always been managed, measured, but you walked in and suddenly nothing fits the way it used to. I can't sleep. I can't think. And I don't want you, but I do." She felt like she couldn't breathe. "This isn't safe," she whispered. "We're not supposed to—" "I know," he said, "but I'm so tired of living in rules that only protect my loneliness." He reached out but stopped short of touching her. "I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know." She stared at his hand. "If you touch me right now," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't think I'll be able to pretend I'm just your maid anymore." You never were, he replied. Something broke then, not between them, within them, a dam they had both tried to hold. The space between them vanished. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe it didn't matter. 1 second they were standing, and the next his hands were in her hair, and her mouth was on his neck, and the bookshelves were the only witnesses to the unraveling of two carefully constructed lives. But even in the fire, there was restraint. He didn't rush. She didn't beg. They moved with the urgency of patience, like people who knew they were standing on the edge of something sacred. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. You undo me, he whispered. You make me forget who I've been. She didn't know what to say. Her heart beat like thunder. And when she returned to her room that night, she didn't cry or shake or regret. She just lay on her small bed, fingers still tingling, skin still burning, and thought, this isn't over. But the next morning, everything changed. He avoided her, completely. No hallway glances, no kitchen conversations. He left the house early, came back late, for days. It was like she had imagined the whole thing, and it hurt more than she thought it would, not because she expected anything, but because he made her feel like she mattered, and then made her feel like a mistake. She went about her duties, quieter, smaller. Mia, the other maid, noticed. You okay? She asked one afternoon. You're folding towels, like they hurt you. Juliet forced a smile. Just tired. But tired wasn't the word. Heart sore, maybe, confused, embarrassed, angry, all of it. And when she finally confronted him, when she finally couldn't take the silence any longer, it was raining. The storm matched her mood. She waited until the house was still, then climbed the stairs to his study. The door was ajar. He was inside, typing, posture stiff. You've been avoiding me, she said without preamble. He looked up, surprised. Juliet. No, don't say my name like it's an apology. He stood. It's not. It's a plea. She stared at him, hands shaking. Then say it, whatever it is. Say it now. He walked toward her, slowly, then stopped. I felt something I didn't know how to hold, and I didn't want to hurt you by doing it wrong. Her breath caught. So you thought silence would hurt less? I thought maybe if I stepped back, you'd step away. But I was wrong. She stepped forward. You don't get to decide for both of us. Then stay, he said. Stay, and we figure this out, slowly, carefully, like it matters. Does it? She whispered. Matter? He reached out, gently cupped her cheek. It's the only thing that does. And in that moment, under flickering light and thunder beyond the windows, she realized something. She hadn't fallen for the billionaire. She had fallen for the man who had been quietly unraveling beside her this whole time. The storm didn't stop that night. Outside the mansion, the wind clawed at the windows and rain pelted the glass, like it was trying to drown the silence. But inside Damien's private study, the world had narrowed to the space between him and Juliet. She hadn't moved since he touched her cheek. He hadn't let go. There was no kiss this time. No breathless urgency. Just the weight of two people standing in a truth they hadn't dared to speak before. She whispered, What do we do now? He dropped his hand, but not his gaze. We stopped pretending this was just a moment. It wasn't. And we stop letting silence do the talking for us. She nodded, but her heart was racing. I don't want to be a secret, she said, quieter now. I've lived too long in other people's shadows. His expression shifted, like her words had landed somewhere deep. Then let me bring you into the light. But first, I need to tell you something. He crossed the room, pulled out a small key from a drawer, and opened a cabinet she'd never seen before. Inside were documents, photographs, and something that looked like an old leather notebook. He took it out, turned it in his hands like it carried weight he wasn't ready to release. You asked me once why I built this house with so many locked rooms, he said. "I told you it was for privacy. That was only half the truth." She didn't speak, only watched. This house was never meant to feel like home. It was meant to keep the past out, but it followed me anyway. He handed her the notebook. "Open it." She did. Inside were sketches, pages and pages of them, drawings of a woman's face, the same woman, over and over, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, sometimes sleeping. Her breath caught. "Who is she?" "My mother," he said. "She was an artist. French, actually. Lived in Paris until she met my father during a business trip. He convinced her to move here, promised her a world of stability. But he didn't give her a home. He gave her a prison. She spent her days drawing, trying to remember what freedom felt like." Juliet turned the pages slowly, reverently, each one more delicate than the last. "She died when I was 17, Damien continued, "and I promised myself I would never let someone I cared about feel trapped again." He ran a hand through his hair. "But the truth is, I've kept people at arm's length for so long that I forgot how to let anyone in. Until you." The room held its breath. She looked up at him. "You built a fortress to protect your heart, and now you're letting me through the front gate?" "No," he said, walking closer. "I'm asking you to take the key." She didn't answer. Instead, she set the notebook down and slowly reached for his hand. "You're not the only one with ghosts," she said. "My father left when I was 6. He disappeared into the fog of some new life and took my sense of safety with him. My mother worked 2 jobs, got sick, and died before she ever got to see the inside of a hospital with real care. I came here because it was the only way I could survive, and I told myself I'd never let a man define my worth again." She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "But you never tried to own me. You just saw me." His fingers tightened gently around hers. They stood that way for what felt like forever, just holding each other's truths. And when she finally leaned her head against his chest, he exhaled, like he'd been waiting to breathe since the day they met. The storm raged, but inside, it was quiet. And for the first time, that quiet didn't feel like something to be afraid of. The next morning, he made coffee for her, not his assistant, not his maid. For her. She sat barefoot on the leather sofa, wrapped in one of his sweaters, watching him move through the kitchen like he wasn't the same man who once avoided eye contact. "You're doing that wrong," she teased, pointing at the way he stirred. He looked back over his shoulder. "Says the girl who put cinnamon in her espresso." "It's a French thing," she said with a smile. "So is flirting over bad coffee," he replied. She laughed softly, and for a moment, the whole world shrunk to the sound of it. They didn't rush into anything after that night. No declarations, no plans, just a slow unfolding. She still cleaned the rooms she was assigned. He still took phone calls in his office, but now there were glances that lingered longer than they should have, words that carried double meanings. And at night, sometimes, they would find themselves in the same hallway, at the same time, and walk together without saying where they were going. One evening, he found her in the greenhouse behind the main estate. She sat on the floor, surrounded by small pots she'd started secretly planting. Lavender, rosemary, even a single, struggling tomato vine. "I didn't know you gardened," he said. She didn't look up. "I didn't know I still remembered how." He crouched beside her. "You're full of surprises." "So are you," she replied. "Like, how you keep the door unlocked now." He smiled faintly. "I'm not hiding anymore." She looked at him then. "Neither am I." Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same pot, and in that moment, without warning, he leaned forward and kissed her not with hunger, but with reverence, like she was the only thing that ever made him believe in the softness of the world. Her fingers found his collar, held him there, and when they pulled back, he whispered, "You don't know what you're doing to me." I think I do, she whispered. Because I feel it too. That night, they didn't sleep in the same bed. Not yet. But they stayed close. And as the days passed, the connection deepened. Not through passion, but through presence. He asked about her favorite poets. She told him about the line she used to write over and over in her journals as a teenager. I am not soft because I break. I am soft because I choose to open again. He listened, like every syllable mattered. She asked him about the hardest thing he had to learn. That money doesn't make you matter, he said. And silence doesn't make you safe. And then came the moment that changed everything. A call came from one of Damien's board members. A leak. Someone had discovered Juliet's presence in the house. Photos had been taken. Assumptions were being made. They think you're keeping her, the man said, like a mistress. The word hit Damien like a slap. He slammed the phone down and stared at the wall. And then he went to find her. She was in the laundry room, folding sheets. When he walked in, she looked up, saw his face, and knew. Tell me, she said. Someone's trying to destroy this, he said, to make it look like you're something you're not. And what am I? She asked gently. Someone I care about more than my reputation, he said. Someone I won't let be erased. She took a slow breath. Then what do we do? He walked closer. We face it, together, not in shadows, not in shame. I won't ask you to disappear. I'll ask you to stay. And if I say yes, she asked, then I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are, not my scandal, not my secret, my choice. And that was the moment she decided. Not because he begged, not because he promised protection, but because she saw the man he had been hiding, and he saw the woman she had become. They didn't need headlines or approval. They just needed to be brave, together. The story broke on a Monday. It started as a whisper, an anonymous post on a local gossip site, with grainy photos and just enough truth to spark wildfire. Billionaire Damien Moreau, seen with French maid behind closed doors, the headline blared. The images weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. One showed Juliet stepping out of the greenhouse in his sweater. Another caught her entering the mansion's east wing late at night. A third showed Damien watching her from the balcony, his expression unreadable but intimate. Within hours, the story hit mainstream digital tabloids, spun into something unrecognizable. The headlines got worse, the assumptions got louder, and the comments, those vicious, bloodless weapons, ripped through Juliet like invisible knives. Of course it's always the maid. Gold-digging French girl lands a billionaire. Wonder what she did to earn that promotion. She didn't cry when she saw it. She didn't scream or run. She simply turned off her phone, stood in the hallway of the house that had become her haven, and waited. He found her there. Damien, who had once ruled boardrooms and silenced entire tables with a single look, stood frozen at the sight of her, not because she was broken, but because she wasn't. You saw it, she said. He nodded. Then say it, she whispered. Say what you're thinking. I'm thinking I should have protected you, he said, stepping closer, but I didn't. I thought keeping us quiet would keep you safe. She raised her eyes. It didn't. He reached for her hand. I know that now. But she didn't take his hand. Not yet. Then, what now, Damien? You issue a statement? Deny it? Tell the world I was just a maid you helped out of pity? No, he said, voice calm but edged with steel. I tell the truth. And what is that? She asked, not flinching. That I fell in love with a woman who saw me before anyone else did, who undressed my soul with a glance, who made this house feel like home. Her breath caught. You love me? I do, he said, no hesitation. Not as a fantasy, not as a mistake, as a truth I should have spoken sooner. The next day, he called a press conference. He didn't tell her until the last minute. She arrived late, wearing a navy dress she'd borrowed from an unused guest closet. Her hair was pinned up, her face bare, no makeup, no mask. He stood at the podium, surrounded by the glint of camera lenses and the murmurs of a dozen media outlets. "There have been rumors," he began, his voice even. "Stories meant to shame a woman I care about, stories written with more cruelty than fact." He paused, his gaze cutting through the noise. "Let me be clear. Juliette Delacour is not a scandal. She's not a secret. She's the most honest part of my life. And if anyone wants to question her place in my home, in my life, they can direct those questions to me. I will not explain her presence, because love does not owe you an explanation." There was silence. Then chaos. Reporters shouting questions, flashes firing. But Juliette didn't move. She stood behind the curtain, her hand pressed to her chest, and felt something shift inside her, something old breaking open, something new being born. Afterwards, the world didn't magically approve. The media spun the story again, softer this time. Billionaire defends his maid-turned-muse. Some applauded, others mocked, but Damien didn't care, and neither did she. That night, he found her in the guest wing, staring at her own reflection. "You still don't believe it's real, do you?" he asked gently. "I do," she said, "but I don't know how to live in it." He walked toward her, slow, deliberate. "Then let me show you." And this time, when he reached for her, she didn't hesitate. They kissed again, not tentative, not soft, hungry, honest, the kind of kiss that says, "I see you, I want you, I choose you." His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, her fingers tangled in his collar, dragging him to the edge of restraint. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her mouth. "I won't," she breathed. "Not tonight." He lifted her gently, carried her to the master bedroom, not like she was fragile, but like she was sacred. The room was quiet, golden with lamplight. The storm was gone, but something wilder stirred between them. He sat her on the edge of the bed and reached for the zipper of her dress. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded, then added with a smile, "Mais oui." He laughed softly. "God, the way you say that." The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her waist. He didn't rush. He looked. He memorized. "You're beautiful," he said. "You say it like it's a fact." "Because it is." Her fingers found the buttons of his shirt. "Let me see you too." Piece by piece they undressed each other. Not just skin. Fears, expectations, walls. She touched the scar on his side. He kissed the curve of her spine. They lay on the bed, bare and breathless, but what passed between them wasn't lust. It was something gentler, deeper, the slow unraveling of everything they'd held back. Later, wrapped in sheets and silence, she whispered, "I don't know what comes next." He looked at her, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "We write it together." "Without secrets?" "Without shame," he said, "without pretending this isn't real." In the days that followed, everything changed. She was no longer the girl in the uniform. She wasn't hidden. She wasn't silent. He moved meetings to spend mornings with her. She started painting again in the greenhouse, on the balcony, on scrap canvas in the kitchen. He watched her, not like a man watching his lover, but like a boy discovering something sacred. She cooked barefoot. He read to her from his mother's journal. They lived like the world might try to take everything from them again, so they clung to what was real. And then one day, she stood at the door of his office, holding a sketch pad. "I drew something," she said. He waved her in. "Let me see." She handed him the paper. It was him, not his face, his hands, his shoulders, his stillness, but drawn in a way that showed how he looked when he listened, how he looked when he wasn't guarded. "You made me look soft," he said. "Because you are," she replied. He set the drawing down. I want to do something. For you. Like what? Something that makes it clear you're not here by accident. She tilted her head. I already know that. But they don't, he said, and I want them to. 2 weeks later, he named her creative director of his new philanthropic initiative, a fund for underprivileged youth in the arts. Her name was on the press release. Her story was the headline, and when a reporter asked, "How did this all begin?" she smiled and said, "With a misunderstanding, and a man who decided to see past it." Damien stood beside her, hand on her back, pride in his eyes. That night, they stood on the rooftop. The city stretched below them. She leaned into him. "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this?" "Every day," he said. "And then, I think about your whisper in French, and how it undid me." "It wasn't the words," she said. "It was the fact you finally listened." "Then I'll keep listening," he whispered, "to everything." She turned, eyes searching his. "Promise?" He nodded. "Promise." Juliet woke first. The light was soft, crawling slowly across the linens like a quiet visitor. She turned her head, expecting to find Damien beside her, warm and steady. But the space was empty, still warm, but empty. Her heart skipped, not with fear, but with recognition. Even after everything, she still didn't expect people to stay. She sat up, the sheet slipping down her bare shoulder, and reached for the note she already sensed was on the nightstand. His handwriting was precise, slanted slightly left. "Early meeting, didn't want to wake you. Be back by 10. Coffee in the kitchen. Yours, D." She smiled faintly, then folded the note and placed it in the drawer beside the bed, where she'd begun keeping pieces of their quiet mornings. By 10, he hadn't returned. By 11, his assistant called. "He's asked that I reschedule his afternoon meetings. He won't be back until tomorrow." The words sat like a stone in her chest. She didn't ask questions. She didn't chase. But something shifted. He hadn't told her. Not the meeting, not the overnight absence, not even a hint. She told herself it was nothing. Business. Obligations. But the truth slid in anyway. She was still the girl who'd been mistaken, who was once too invisible to inform, and somewhere in the silence between then and now, it had started to matter. The next day, Damien returned, jaw tight, movements clipped. Something had happened. She saw it before he spoke, in the way he barely kissed her temple, in the way his hands didn't linger when they brushed hers. At dinner, he barely touched his plate. She asked softly, "Was it a bad trip?" He paused, then nodded. "Just politics, old boardroom games." But it wasn't just that. She knew it the way she knew when a storm was coming. That night, as he sat in the study with his sleeves rolled, staring at the same email for 20 minutes, she walked in quietly and asked, "Are we okay?" He looked up, eyes heavy. "Why wouldn't we be?" "Because I can feel the distance again," she said. "Because I stopped being scared and started trusting this, and now it feels like you've already turned away." His face cracked open just slightly. "It's not you," he said. "It's this world. It demands that I make moves before I can explain them." "But I'm not part of that world," she replied. "I'm just part of you." "That's why I tried to keep you separate," he said, voice almost breaking. "Because they won't protect you, not like I want to. So instead of pulling me closer, you pull away," she said, not accusing, just naming. "That's not love, Damien. That's fear." He stood, walked past her, then turned. "Maybe I don't know how to love without breaking things." "Then break me," she whispered. "But don't disappear." 2 days later, he was gone again. No note this time. No coffee. Just absence. She stayed in the house alone, walking through rooms that used to hold laughter. His scent lingered, his shirt still hung beside hers. But he didn't call. Didn't write. and the part of her that had started to heal began to unravel. She called Mia. "I need to get out of the city." Her sister didn't ask questions. "Come home." The house in Vermont was small, old, nestled in woods that felt untouched by time. Juliet unpacked slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply stopped waiting. Days turned into a week. She painted. She cooked. She read by the fire. And still she didn't hear from him. One evening she stepped outside barefoot, the grass cool against her skin. She looked up at the sky, full of stars, and said aloud, "I let you see me, all of me, and I don't regret it, but I won't beg to be seen again." She didn't know that miles away, Damien sat in his office staring at the necklace she'd left on the bathroom counter. He hadn't meant to leave her. He'd meant to protect her. A business partner had warned him of a hostile press leak planned by a rival firm, targeting Juliet's appointment to his foundation, calling it emotional nepotism. The only way to delay the release was to distance her from his brand. He was told it would blow over in a week. He thought silence would be safer. But now, in her absence, everything felt louder. The house was empty. The press didn't matter. The empire he'd built felt suddenly fragile. He opened his laptop, pulled up the leaked draft article, and saw the words that made his blood turn cold. "Unnamed source confirms she's just another French affair." The article never published. He paid the firm to bury it, but Juliet never knew, and now she was gone. He tried calling her. No answer. Tried Mia. No reply. Then he got in his car. Drove 6 hours through rain and silence and guilt. When he arrived, it was nightfall. The house was lit softly from within. He didn't knock, just stood outside the window, watching her read a worn book by the fire. She looked different, smaller and stronger all at once. He knocked once, gently. She opened the door, eyes widening, but she didn't smile. "Why are you here?" He exhaled. "To tell you what I should have said the day I left." "Then say it," she said, arms crossed. "I tried to protect you," he began. "A rival firm was planning to expose our relationship, to use it against the charity, against you. They threatened to make it about sex, about power. So I vanished, thinking silence was safer. I was wrong." "Yes," she said. "You were." He stepped closer. "I thought I had to choose between you and everything I'd built." "And you didn't choose me," she said. "I didn't think I could ask you to stand in a fire you didn't start," he replied. "But I see now you've walked through worse fires alone. I should have stood beside you." She looked down. "You left me holding the silence again." He reached into his coat, pulled out a small sketchbook, hers. "You left this in the greenhouse. There's a drawing in it of me." She nodded. "I was trying to remember what it felt like when you looked at me like I mattered." "You still do," he said. "Even more." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Let him in." They sat by the fire in silence. Not the cold kind, the kind that waits. He turned to her. "I don't want the empire. I want the woman who made it feel real." She whispered, "I wanted you to fight for me. I'm here now. So fight." He took her hand, placed it against his chest. "Then this is my beginning, not an apology, a promise." She didn't reply, not with words, but she didn't let go. The following morning, the sun rose gently through the trees outside the cottage window. Juliet stirred first, her cheek pressed against the soft fabric of Damien's shirt, still warm with sleep. She didn't move. Not yet. She just listened to the rhythm of his breath, steady and present, like he'd finally stopped running. She thought about the girl she was when she stepped into the penthouse for the first time, wearing borrowed shoes and silence like a second skin. That girl would have never believed this moment was possible. Not just the love, but the way it made space for her, without demands or conditions. Damien stirred beside her, his arm slipping naturally around her waist as if he'd always known she belonged there. "You're awake," he murmured. "So are you," she replied softly. "I never really slept when you were gone." He kissed her temple, and for the first time, she didn't tense. She had nothing left to protect. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we stop hiding. From each other. From the world. From the parts of ourselves that think we have to earn every breath of love." Later that week, they returned to the city. No press release, no grand gesture. Just two people who had learned the cost of absence and chosen presence instead. Juliet didn't go back to cleaning rooms. She didn't need to. Damien introduced her not as an assistant, not as a project, but as the co-director of a new cultural initiative. She helped design a platform for immigrant artists, storytellers, and voices like hers that had been overlooked too long. Some people whispered, some questioned, but most listened because they could feel the truth in her voice when she spoke at the launch event. She didn't use perfect English. She didn't wear borrowed clothes. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair loose, and when she took the stage, she said, "I once thought I had to survive quietly, but love taught me that the world listens when you speak from a place you refuse to abandon." Damien stood beside her, not as her rescuer, but as a man who had finally learned how to show up for someone without needing to control the outcome. And when the cameras turned to him, he simply said, "She didn't change my life. She reminded me I had one." That night, in the quiet of their apartment, she whispered, "Do you still remember that night when you walked in on me?" He smiled. "I remember the way you whispered in French and how everything else faded." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "I don't need to be undone. I just need to be beside you." They didn't need fireworks. They didn't need approval. They had each other. And that was everything. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive cleanly. Sometimes it walks in by accident. But the real story begins when two people choose to stay through the silence, through the fear, through the fire, and build something not perfect, but real.